welcome to the Healing Word of the Week podcast with me, Marissa of Marissa Moments, where you might get triggered into seeing your own reflection, but it's to reconnect you to yourself and awaken the divinity within. So prepare for laughs, resonance, and accountability through true stories, channeled messages, prophetic words, and everything in between. So I hope you're ready because guess what? Here we go. Can we talk about underdogs? Oh, that's the word of the week, by the way. Underdog or underdogs, plural, it doesn't matter. But here's the thing, true story, right? I always like to tell you the true story of what brings these messages about. Is that I was talking to a friend recently and they referred to me as an underdog, right? And when they were saying it, they were like, wow, this is amazing how much you've done and all these types of things. I mean, it could have been, and it was a real ego feed. I felt really good about myself in the moment and after I processed what that conversation entailed as well, because sometimes I'm going to be real honest with you. When I'm having conversations, I'm not necessarily processing every single thing that's said. So sometimes I have to fold it up, stick it in my back pocket like a little note that we used to pass in grade school. And then I take it out later and that's when I process it, right? That's when I go over it and I'm like, okay, now I can absorb the lessons, the wisdom, all of the things. Yes, it is as exhausting as it sounds. And it could be a form of overthinking, but I choose to look at it as processing. Anyway, we're talking about underdogs, right? Now, what I receive in my spirit to share with you is that underdogs that notion can work twofold, right? It can work as a motivator to allow you to channel the energy of being misunderstood, being misrepresented, and all of the misses, right? All of those misses that have been aimed at you and all those types of things and the ways that you've been targeted in such a negative light, right? You've been counted out. You've been dismissed. You've been placated. You've been mishandled. You've been tormented. You've been projected with toxic patterns and behaviors and all of these different types of things, right? And that's a real life story. That's your truth, right? And never be ashamed of it because it's nothing to be ashamed of is what I get to share with you. But at the same time, these things happen to many people. And what we can do where that twofold comes in is that sometimes we can either channel that energy into something positive, right? That's where we find that purpose behind the pain, or we can become angry and resentful and become the villain of ours and everyone else's story, right? Because then we choose to bottle up all of that angst and all of that anger and all of that resentment. And then we spew it onto anyone and everyone that comes our way or even looks our way, God forbid, right? Now, but what I received to share with you is we can't often get caught up in these labels because what ends up happening is it becomes an ego feed, right? When somebody calls you the things that your spirit has been longing to be acknowledged for, but your physical body may not even realize it, right? In that conversation that I had with a friend, I didn't realize in that moment, and it's not something that I consciously carry around, the notion of see me, right? Even though I understand and I know that everyone wants to be seen, heard, felt, acknowledged, all of these things. That is the true aspect of love, right? And that is what we're trying to create on this planet is just a full-on notion of love, and i.e. creating this heaven on earth, which if I'm going to a side note, heaven on earth is something that's internal, right? It's not necessarily something that's external because, listen, the way the earth is working right now is real ghetto, okay? It's like, and I'm saying that because, listen, I grew up in the hood, I grew up in the ghetto, I grew up in all the things. Well, I don't know if it'd be considered the ghetto, but it was definitely the hood. But anyway, all disclaimers aside, when we talk about heaven on earth, we're talking about an internal state of being because there are always the people who are labeled as underdogs, and that are true underdogs that choose to go to that dark side of things instead of channeling their angst into something that can be more positive for not only themselves, but for those around them, right? Because more often than not, we can't see beyond ourselves, right? And that's a whole part of the healing journey, is to grow that capacity to not only heal from within, but once we heal from within, it broadens our vantage point. It broadens our global view, our cultural views, our ethnic views, our everything views, our diversity, being able to see beyond the singularities that the world programs us to see, as seeing beyond the labels that the world wishes us to digest, right? And become a part of us as an individual. But anyway, I'm getting away from the word of the week, which is underdog. Yes, it is true. You are an underdog, and everybody loves a good underdog story, right? Because otherwise Hollywood would not even exist. And you want to know the reason why these underdog stories are so critically acclaimed and so popular and all these things is because we can relate to them. And the reason we can relate to them is because we are underdogs. Now, what is the point of Spirit having me share this notion with you? It is, I'm going to tell you, it is so that way we can pause and have a very reflective, mindful moment of ascertaining what we're doing with this label. Because at the end of the day, we're all going to have labels. We can't escape it within this current society. Hopefully in the future, we won't have as many labels and we won't be defined by what people choose to define us as. But we're in the here and now, so that's where we have to remain, and that's what we have to work from, right? Now, what are you doing with that underdog notion? And let's not pretend that we're not the underdog. Let's not pretend that this isn't a label that necessarily suits us, because once we choose to deny, then we just end up lying. And once we start lying, then we can't acknowledge ourselves and we can't truly heal, right? So once you're in a space and place of acknowledgement, then see what you're doing with it. Are you allowing it to build some sort of defensive wall mechanism within you where you end up projecting onto others, where you don't feel like you can trust others, where when you enter into a new space and place with completely different people and different energies, you're already operating under the assumption that they're going to shove you in the corner too, because that's what everybody else does? Or even more so, what Spirit just had me think about is the notion of you're actually shoving yourself into the corner because you're creating this self-fulfilling prophecy based off of the label that was maybe thrown onto you in your childhood. And now you've grown so accustomed to it that you're doing anything and everything to reconfirm it in your mind. You're creating this earthly algorithm, if you will, to bring about the results that you seek. Right? That self-fulfilling prophecy. If you build it, they will come. Or are you taking these notions and throwing them out the window? Because here's what I have had to do. Like I mentioned in the explanation, what are words, in the explanation of the story and kind of recapping what happened to make me even think of the notion of underdog, I recognize that I don't think about myself as that anymore, I should say. I want to be very honest and very clear with you guys, because there were certain aspects of my life and certain periods of time where I saw myself as only a victim. And that was how I operated through life. Under that victim mentality, in that underdog mentality, which I'll use interchangeably, when I was in that state of mind, then I couldn't proceed forward. I had to continue to return back to my victimizers. I had to continue to feed the algorithm that would keep me in my air quotes place because that was all I knew. And that's what I felt I deserved. Right. And that was because I was dwelling in the darkness. And then something switched in me, and I can't really put my finger on it. I'm meditating on it. I'm processing. I'm doing all the things because I really want to be able to share with you guys how I was able to make this switch in a tangible way. And once I get that notion, I promise I'm going to share it with you. But in the meantime, I can tell you that when I did make that switch, and, when I did start choosing gratitude, which is an integral aspect, one very important aspect of my ascension and healing journey, then that's when I rediscovered a boldness within myself that had always been there, but I allowed to go dormant because I was so focused on the label of victim, of underdog, of, pet, basically, right? Because I was often placated, and people still try to do that, right? People still try to put me in that proverbial role. However, I refuse to go there because I know I'm beyond that, right? It doesn't mean that I'm better than anyone else. It just means that I know my worth, right? And I will walk within the light that God has placed within me, because God has given me capabilities that others will have me spurn, that others would have me deny and denounce and all those things just to feed into their labels that they feel comfortable with having upon me, right? People will often try to make you feel small when they feel like you are larger than them, right? People will often try to make you squeeze into some sort of box because they want to keep you in a place and space that makes them feel safe and comfortable. Because heaven forbid you see your true capabilities. When you see your true worth, then now they have to grow if they intend to stay by your side, right? They have to extend themselves, stretch themselves, become uncomfortable in order to walk in the same realms that they know you're about to go into. So oftentimes people will slap that underdog label on you just as a means of bait and switch, right? Just as a means of confusion, to keep you at bay, to keep you on a leash is what I see. And what Spirit has put on my heart to share with you, what God has put on my heart to share with you, is that it's time to cut the leash, right? It's time to cut the leash from man, to be even more specific. Because when we adapt to these labels, when we allow these labels to put us in places and spaces of darkness, anger, resentment, angst, and all those other things, then we are in fact denouncing God, right? Because God did not make us to be small. God did not put gifts within us to be hidden. God did not give us a spirit of boldness in order to just hush us, right? Whatever God has put within you is what you should be having on display. Not going by what everybody else tells you need to be. Not going by other people's definitions of you. Not going by feeding or walking your walk and talking your talk through the lens and filter of other people's fears, right? Yes, you may have been the underdog, and yes, maybe you are still the underdog, but that doesn't have to define your life, and that doesn't have to define your story. That doesn't have to define your walk in today's day and age. You have the potential within you. It's up to you to choose which side you tap into. Again, it is a twofold, it goes two ways. And it's up to you to choose which direction, which road you're going to take. Granted, at a certain stage within all of us, we don't necessarily have the option to say, I'm going to go this way or I'm going to go that way, just because we are subjected to whomever is raising us, right? We're subjected to, we're at the beck and call or whatever of whoever holds the purse, essentially. Because let's just be real, we got to eat, we need shelter. And sometimes we won't even have that, right? Sometimes we won't even have that food. But even in those moments, we're still, because of that humanity in us that makes us want to latch on and be connected with other people. Sometimes the people that are nearest and closest to us are the ones that feed us the most darkness, right? However, there will come a time where you have the option and the opportunity to choose to make that conscious decision and to go with your intuitive guidance system that says something's not right here. And when you get that something's not right here, that is when God is giving you the opportunity to stay or go. And sometimes it may not even look like that, right? Sometimes it may put you in the most, what I receive as disastrous of circumstances. Listen, I've had to live out of my car. I've had to wait and sleep in my car in a parking lot. And I was blessed to have a car at the time to sleep in the parking lot to wait until after midnight for that check to go through because I had negative money, right? And I couldn't put gas in my gas tank. So I had to sleep in the car because I knew that if I tried to get on the road at that point, I wouldn't have even made it home, right? So then I knew that, okay, well, my direct deposit is going to hit at midnight. And so want to know what I did? I slept in the parking lot in my car. And then I set my alarm, and at midnight, I checked my bank account. And you want to know what happened at midnight? Nothing. Absolutely nothing. Listen, the system didn't turn over until about 2 or 3 in the morning. And that's when I could go get $5 in my tank and actually go home. And listen, so the reason I give that illustration and tell you that story is because my life has not always been flowers and daffodils. And it's not even all flowers and daffodils right now, but I'm focusing in on my blessings. So when you look at me, that's the reflection that you see. You don't see my struggles because I don't wear them on my sleeve for you to see. Right? My struggles are between me and my God, right? And myself and my husband. So that way we can form our union even stronger and figure out and navigate the things that come up against us, right? Because we have formed a union. My kids won't even know of our struggles because they are children and I allow them to be children. Right? But I'm getting away from the main subject at hand. But somebody had to hear that, right? Somebody needed to hear that part of my story as well. Because again, oftentimes we look at people and all we see is the glitz and the glamour, and we can't see beyond what their surface shows. Even though I'm not a glitzy gal, at least not at this moment. Maybe I will be tomorrow. Listen, I don't know where God is going to lead me. Maybe I'll get a glam squad and all of a sudden I'm like smacked full of makeup like Bozo the Clown. Who knows? I'm open to it, right? But I said that to say this. We have to stop looking at people's surface structures, right? Because sometimes that person that's in that back corner of that social gathering is a person with the greatest, most brilliant mind that will have the most interesting conversations if you give them an opportunity. But the reason they're shoved into that corner is because somebody along the way told them that they had nothing worth value to mention. Somebody made them feel like they had nothing to contribute to the conversation. And yes, I am speaking from personal experience. And now when I share these stories with people, they can't even recognize that person in the corner because guess what? I fought my way out. I was the underdog. I still am. And there's nothing wrong with it. But what I've chosen to do with that label is to lean towards the light. So that way I can not only help other people, but I can continuously help myself because we heal while we heal ourselves. We heal others while we heal ourselves. And that's not an outreach program. That's not saying that I need to knock on somebody's door and say, hey, you ready for a healing? No, I'm healing by example. I'm healing by walking my talk, not just talking my talk, right? So all of that to say, if you feel like you are the underdog, then it's probably because you are. However, what you choose to do with that label, what you choose to do at that exact moment where you become mindful and completely aware and self-aware and all those things, what you choose to do at that moment, that's what's going to determine your outcome. That's what's going to determine where you go from here. Because it's very easy to stay in that state of depression, right? And even with that, because oftentimes in that underdog mentality and that victimhood, just mentality, it often breeds a state of depression as well, that anxiety and depression and all those other things, right? And listen, again, I've had all these labels. I've gone to therapy. I've done the work, right? The hard work, right? I've done all that work so that way I can also tell you about it. So that way it does also break that stigma of the notion of going to therapy, of seeking help, because that's the bottom line there too. We have to understand when we can't do it by ourselves. God will help us, but God also helps those who help themselves. So if we're in our own way with these underdog mentalities and this depression that comes along with it, or this anxiety that comes along with it, or whatever else, then we're going to basically say that this is where we wish to stay, right? Or we can say, I can't do it on my own, Lord. Please help me, show me where I need to go, who I need to speak with. Use that spirit of discernment, not sharing with the same friends that put you in the corner in the first place, right? Because no, absolutely not. But going to someone who is a professional, who doesn't have a pony in the show, whatever it is, right? Who doesn't have any skin in the game, I guess we want to call it. I don't even know what that means, but it felt right to say at the moment. But bottom line is seek help. Seek help if you know you can't do it on your own. If you've tried to get yourself out of that corner time and time again, but you always find yourself tethered back and like bungeed back to that same place and space, then that is a foolproof notion that you need additional help. And there is free help out there. So I don't even want to entertain. I don't even entertain the excuse of saying I can't access it. I don't have, any of those things, because if you can hear my voice right now, that means you have the internet. And if you have the internet, that means you probably have access to Google. And if you have access to Google, then you can look up free therapy. You can look up free mental health services, right? And you can find somebody who's reputable, maybe not in your space, maybe not in your city, your country, or whatever. But if you have, again, access to the internet, this is a God's blessing to you, then you have access. So any way that you say, I can't do it, I don't have the means, I can't afford it, any of those things, that's just you saying, I want to stay where I'm at and I refuse to move on. But I want to give the appearance that I'm trying, right? Listen, underdogs of the world are uniting right now. And we're coming out of the shadows. We're coming out from the boxes that we've been shoved in for the majority of our lives. We are taking over, right? Because now something has switched in the world that says that we can. And I'm here today and now to serve as a reminder to you of your capabilities. Listen, I always say I'm not here to preach. I'm not even here to teach, but I am here to remind you of who you are and what you're capable of. Choose the light, choose God, choose ascension. You have to make the conscious choice. No one can make it for you. You have free will. You do not have to stay where you have always been just because you grew comfortable. You have to become comfortable within the discomfort of growth. So I'm not going to keep going on and on because this has gone on long enough, but I hope you're getting the message that I am trying to put down, because yes, this message is for and about you. And it is time to get into that conscious space where you choose to make actionable change, tangible change in your own life. Choose to become the main character in your own movie and get out from under what everyone has shoved you into be. And that is it, because it's time for the underdog to show up and show out. Remember, we cause no intentional harm to self or one another. Outside of that, let's go. Okay, so that was long. Sorry about that. But I just get so passionate, right? Because these messages are put on my heart by what I receive to be God, right? Because that's who I pray to. And that's who I try to use my discernment to make sure that these messages aren't of the enemy, right? I want to provoke, but provoke in a positive way. I want to remind you of who you are and whose you are, right? Because for so long, the world has programmed us away from God, away from our own personal divinity, away from our own gifts, right? And forced us through trauma and desensitization and just indoctrination and all of these things to grow farther and farther away from our Father, right? So now is the time to get back closer to Him, get back closer to self, recognize self, and by doing so, by healing the self, you are actually creating a huge ripple effect that you may not even be able to comprehend at this moment. But you will see in time. You will see based off of the people that are surrounding you. You will see based off of the people who stop and say, hey, that you have a really nice smile. Or did you do something different? Because, wow, you look amazing, right? All of these different things are just the subtle cues of the world to remind you that you are walking in the right direction. And don't worry, if you're not getting those cues right now, they will come. You just have to continue your walk. Remember, start today or start in 30 days. The journey is still going to be there before you, and you do have the capacity, and you can. Right? So I'm not going to continue going on and on because, again, I already have, but I hope you receive your message. I hope you know today that you matter, you are capable, and you are loved. I see you, I feel you, I hear you, I am you. All right. So let's keep going. Remember, follow me all over social media. I'm everywhere. I probably shouldn't be. When you look me up, just remember it is Marissa Moments, and that's Marissa with one S, because I always like to say there's only one me. So in the meantime, apples, tomatoes, all the things, happiest of happy healing, and bye.